All right, we are back on the FloTrack podcast. Back-to-back days here. I'm Kevin. He's Gordon. Gordon, we got a YouTube channel that we need to plug here at the top of the show. I've been told, tell the people what they need to know.
They need to like and subscribe, right? That's what these kids are saying these days. Smash that like button. Yeah, all of our podcasts on YouTube. You know where YouTube is. You just put it in your Google search, youtube.com. FloTrack podcast. We have two channels. We have the FloTrack channel where we put up a lot of races, some other stuff, interviews. But there's a new channel called the FloTrack podcast channel, and that's where we'll have the full episodes of every podcast, some clips from each podcast. So check it out. If you don't want to still watch us on the site though. If you want to watch us on FloTrack.org, you can still do that. But if you don't want to watch us on FloTrack.com/.org, head over to YouTube. Also, the audio version, Spotify, Stitcher, you get it. We're everywhere. We're just trying to spam the whole world with our two talking heads. But yeah, subscribe to the FloTrack podcast YouTube channel if you want to enjoy this podcast via that medium. That's one thing. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts via YouTube. Like when Joe Rogan was only on YouTube, I would listen to Joe Rogan on YouTube. But now that he's not on YouTube, it's forcing me to go to Spotify. But we're not forcing you to go anywhere. You can listen to us on YouTube, on the site, or audio anywhere else. So yeah, like and subscribe. All right.
That was a great plug. That was a great plug. Yeah. Comment. You're supposed to talk about comments though. People should comment on there. We got one from yesterday. Sebastian said, "Good stuff." Which, if you can get a positive YouTube comment, that's a win. Previous iterations of comments about me on YouTube have included various negative things about my face. So good stuff. I will take it. We'll move forward, but we'll read comments from there too. If you have things that you want to chime in about in the running world. Someone also wrote a story on here in the comments about the time they were a seventh man. I mean, you have a blank canvas on YouTube. You can just write as much as you want. I mean, you can email us as well, flotrackpodcast@gmail.com. But if you want to just do it in the YouTube comments for everybody to see, and then preface it with, Gordon isn't man enough to read this, and then post it, maybe Gordon would read it. Maybe he'll read it because he'll feel challenged.
That's very true. I'm not man enough to read a lot of comments, but if you call me out, maybe I'll read it. Anyway.
Okay, let's get to the show. Back-to-back days, as I mentioned. We covered a lot of ground yesterday between collegiate cross country, professional indoor track, collegiate indoor track. But there's some news that we wanted to get to today and some races we wanted to preview. And we just found out about this one that's taking place on Friday. Gordon, you've already combed through the start list of a meet in Tallahassee, which features Stanford, Colorado, and Iowa State, among other teams. What are the big things people should know about this meet that's happening on a Friday?
Yeah, it's basically another similar type meet as the Nevada meet. Maybe a little less firepower up top there's no NAU or BYU, but names wise, there are still a lot of good teams. You have Colorado, you have Iowa State, you have Stanford, Syracuse, Utah State, Southern Utah, a few other strong teams, like some teams with some good individuals. I think Alabama is sending Mercy Chilangat, maybe, or Esther Gitai. So we got some great names. Oklahoma State women, Notre Dame women. It's going to be a good meet, and I think it's going to be an important meet for a lot of these teams who may not have a top-tier finish in their conference to get points in order to qualify for nationals. Because I know we kind of forgotten about this, but there's no regionals this year for cross-country. And a lot of these
when
teams...
you say points, what do you mean? When you say points, you don't mean actual points.
No, I don't say actual points. I mean just wins on your resume. So that when a committee looks at what you did in your cross-country season all the way back from the fall to now, if you got fourth in your conference, did you do something outside of your conference that makes it worth sending you as well? There are teams, I think if you win a Power 5 conference, you probably are a lock. But outside of that, you're going to have some resumes of good wins over other teams that are planning on making the meet. It's going to be weird.
Mhm.
I'm excited to kind of try to predict what the committee's going to do. I think as we get closer to March, we should do our own little podcast where we say, here are the 31 teams we think should go to nationals. Obviously, there's teams that are going no matter what, like the Stanfords, the Oregons, and NAUs, BYUs. But it's that second tier from 15 to 30 that I feel like is where the real interesting dynamics unfold. And again, limited meets, but now that we had this Nevada meet and this meet here coming up on Friday, the FSU Winter Classic, there's going to be another Nevada meet in 2 weeks. I think Oregon's putting on a meet also this Friday. We're getting some of these, Wisco-esque type meets, these pre-nat-esque type meets that will be really helpful to fill out the field outside of just who does well at their conference. So
I'm looking at the start list, and I'm using it as just a way to pare down who's going to be running this year as an indication of, okay, because sometimes you don't see people and you find out later that they're injured. And under that standard, Stanford women looking pretty good based on who they have on the start list. Gordon, you're just running through it. Okay, of course, they have Donahue there. They have Lawson. They have Oakes. They have Julia Haymock. Sophia Dudek is also listed there as well. Aubrey Roberts, who was at Northwestern previously and is a very, very accomplished runner at the NCAA level. If all of them are healthy and all of them are fit, and we'll find out in 2 days the level of their fitness, you can see why Stanford is one of the favorites for this meet. Interested to see Wesley Kiptoo coming back after his first collegiate loss of his his first NCAA D1 loss over the 3K to some Oregon guys. Now he's back in an 8,000 on the cross country course. I'm excited to see that as well too. But to me, the Stanford women are the big story. We had just talked to yesterday about how, I think I just posted the clip too, about how the women's race is just so wide open because we have no idea who's doing what, who's in shape. But Stanford can answer a lot of those questions with this one race. We know the podium is wide open, but maybe they're going to assert themselves as the title favorite on Friday in Tallahassee. But we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and also Stanford men get to see the debut of Cole Sprout, freshman from Stanford. See how he does. I'm excited to see. It's just a lot of excitement around seeing more than just NAU and BYU. A lot of times we kind of zoom in only on that little matchup, but we got to realize there's 30 teams, there's other great storylines, there's other great athletes, and I'm excited to see the Syracuses, the Stanfords all compete. And it's weird, right? We're gonna see Wesley Kiptoo try to win a cross country meet after just running a 7:48 3K a week prior.
Yeah.
It's just so weird.
Yeah. A lot of shoe changes this year for people.
Yeah.
You got to have your cross country spikes, your track spikes. Did you want to talk about that a preliminary ranking thing that you sent me yesterday via text, or do you not want to talk about that?
Which one? For indoor or for cross country?
For indoor, following up on my statement yesterday that I thought the Oregon men had asserted themselves as favorites, and you sent me something yesterday. I guess now you have to say it because I've talked about it. I should never start a conversation point with, do you want to read this private text that you sent me on the air? Is that something you want to do? Does that sound like fun?
Yeah, sure. I'll read the private text message I sent to you on the air. It's totally normal. So we'll have updated indoor rankings coming up either later today or on Thursday. So check out the site for that. But I started going through at least on the men's side, and the Oregon men are the best team in the country by a lot. Not even close. They have a chance to score over 70 points in a championship meet where we think 40 is what it's going to take to win. We have them scoring probably about 70 plus. The next team would probably be like an LSU or Florida State, and they're in the low 40s, high 30s. Yeah, Oregon men. I think they made a good call. They have great distance runners in Cooper Tier, Cole Hawker, and Charlie Hunter. but I don't think they have enough to really compete against an NAU or BYU at the cross country landscape. But now I think they just find their niche, and they've realized, hey, do we want to go all in on cross country and at best get fourth, or do we want to go all in on indoor and win? And I think Robert Johnson decided to make the call and be like, hey, go all in on indoor and get that win.
Well, even if NAU and BYU and everybody else in the distance scene was showing up to indoors, Oregon would be in a strong position because they just broke the collegiate record in the DMR. They just had two guys go sub 750 in the 3,000. They just had a guy run 354 in the mile on the distance side. So they were going to get points indoors regardless. And I think this moved them from one of the teams that could win it to, you're right, clear favorite. When you sent me that number in the high 60s, that exceeded what I thought was possible because we were talking about, oh yeah, mid 40s could win it. So if you're talking about a score in the 60s, that gives them plenty of margin for error. I assume you have like Hunter with 10 points in the mile, Tier and
No.
Hawker. No, you
I
don't.
think I have Hunter getting second or third.
Okay, so you're being conservative with this 67 point projection too. Okay, so that just goes to show you the strength. And the next best team is down there in the 40s, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Oregon, they have a good 800 meter in Luis Peralta. They have two good milers in Hunter and Brown. They have two good 5K runners in Messler and Tier. They have two good 3K runners in Hawker and Tier. Good DMR. They have a really good sprinter. They have a really good triple jumper. And they have a good heptathlete. That's a lot. That's a lot of good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That analysis was brought to you by Gordon. Women's side of things, well, you'll release that tomorrow, correct?
Yeah,
that one's probably a little more. Yeah, that one's a little more murky at this point. Yeah, I got to admit that kind of snuck up on me. It was almost like one weekend. They went to Fayetteville in one weekend and then just dropped big performance after big performance. And then you combine that with what we learned on Monday about Nagus not running indoors, NAU probably not, BYU probably not, and then the seas parted for the Oregon men there to move into the top spot. While we're at just like reading people's communications, you wanted to talk about JoJo's tweets now? Is that next up on the rundown here?
Sure, yeah. Well, it wasn't her tweet. She's just screenshotting the report about what happened at the American Track League this past weekend. As you know, Raven Rogers and Donovan Brazier did not run, not because they had COVID, but due to contact tracing of someone who had COVID. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times you can think about it like, oh, okay, well, they missed that meet. Who cares? It's a random meet in February, random indoor meet. I don't think Donovan's going to lose sleep over not being able to run a 600 right now. But if that were to happen during the trials, I think all hell would break loose. I think we sometimes forget that if these type of situations, and you see it in the NBA and in the NFL, I mean, in football, they had to play without a quarterback. They played with like a wide receiver at quarterback, the Denver Broncos, right? There's been times when a head coach couldn't play a playoff game. All this different things happening. Basketball teams are, super diluted due to COVID and all that stuff. And sometimes in basketball, they cancel the game because they don't have enough players. But here's the thing. They're not going to cancel the race because Donovan Brazier can't be there, which would be wild. Like, imagine if someone like Brazier's status can't be there. We're going to be like, we're kidding? We're not going to let the best runner in the world represent Team USA? Mm-hmm. And there's going to be two sides to this. There's going to be situations where a star doesn't get to be in it. That's going to be wild. And then because of that person who would have gotten fourth, all of a sudden is getting third, and now it changes the lifelong trajectory of an athlete because they can call themselves an Olympian. There could be situations where the heats line up a certain way, and you could be in one of the death heats, right? You're like, oh, there's no way I'm getting out of this heat. But then COVID can make a death heat become an easy heat, and therefore you move on to the next round, and before you know it, you're making the Olympic team. And I think a lot of this kind of reminds me of like the Charles Jock journey from 2016. If you remember that 800 rounds, so many wild things happened. First wild thing, Donovan Brazier, being a rookie, gets knocked out in the first round. That's not normal. Mm-hmm. Dwayne Solomon, who was healthy, just accidentally jogged at the end and gets nipped at the line and gets knocked out. Then there were situations where Craig Engels was running like a maniac and like he was like disqualifying people. There's just like different things between him and Shaquille Walker, where certain people advanced and didn't advance because of, I think they had to run a final with like 9 people because of it. I don't remember exactly, but there was just all this chaos, and throughout all that chaos, Charles Jock made it through the rounds. Like, I think Jock only made it through the first round because of Dwayne Solomon pulling up early. The man who ended up making the Olympic team would have easily been eliminated in the first round if it wasn't for Dwayne Solomon doing a mental mistake. Now take all that chaos and add in contact tracing.
Yeah,
we could see the weirdest 800-meter team of all time. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen because we want our best 3 on that day to make it, and it would be really a shame if an outside force causes us to have a weird Olympic team. But it's something that we have to start thinking about, maybe start being in fear of, and try to find a way to come up with a policy that doesn't allow this to happen. I mean, we were talking about this before the podcast started. Like, what if there's, some kid who is the 48th best miler, right? And he just got in because he ran a 3:38, and he's the 48th best on the descending order list. He's not making the Olympic team. He's just there because it's cool to make the trials. He goes in, runs the first round, gets dead last in his heat, and calls it a day. Well, he also happened to sit in the waiting room or the paddock area for like a long time, probably exposing himself to other people. And therefore, what if he comes back, tests positive, and then everyone in that heat is contact traced, and like the entire heat is wiped out? Now, I don't think they'll do that because that'll be like the most ridiculous thing. But anything in that world is a possibility, depending on how strict they take contact tracing, how strict the whole thing is, right? So it's something to think about, and I'm sure USOC and USATF are trying to figure out how can we ensure that we don't let COVID skew our trials selection process. Because other countries, they just pick the best 3. We actually have to have an event to pick the best 3.
Yeah.
Like, COVID doesn't affect a selection, but COVID does affect a race. So.
Well, and a similar thing we assume could happen at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And so they need to get this right really on 2 occasions, the Olympic trials and the Olympics, if you're an American athlete. The other thing you and I were discussing before we were recording was, okay, maybe a lot of these favorites, these big name athletes, are just going to put themselves or their groups in bubbles and try to minimize any sort of outside contact. But the situation that you brought up makes that irrelevant. You have to have this is just like with other sports. You have to have everybody in, or it doesn't make any sense at all. But the amount of people involved in an Olympic trials is massive, from the athletes, the coaches, the trainers, the officials, the volunteers, the people carrying the athletes' clothes back and forth. So to put all of them in a bubble would be a Herculean task. But then on the flip side, I don't know how else you would do it and have any sort of assurance that you're going to get through the meet without any sort of incidents. Now, it's still 4 or 5 months away, 4.5 months away. Maybe by that point they'll have a different way to respond. Like, the sports world will figure out a different way to respond to issues like this. I think NCAA's will be an interesting test here coming up in 6 weeks with cross and indoors, because that's a bunch of different teams coming from a bunch of different places where they're mingling with a bunch of different people at the university. Or even the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. We haven't heard anything yet, but the nightmare scenario you proposed it'd be the equivalent to Patrick Mahomes on Friday night being contact traced out of the Super Bowl or Tom Brady being contact traced out of the Super Bowl. You can't redo that. They're not going to postpone the Super Bowl, just in the same way they're not going to postpone the Olympic trials. I don't want to be afraid of it, though, because I'm afraid of enough things right now. I want to live in this blissful ignorance of it. But I don't know how you do it other than you just you completely change the policy, or you figure out some way to get every single person that's going to come in contact with these athletes into a bubble a week ahead of time and just do a rigorous testing process and boot people in the same way they booted people from the NBA when they got takeout delivered. Like, that's probably the only way you'd have 100% certainty that this would go off without a hitch.
There is not enough financial backing in the sport of track and field to pull off a bubble. They're not going to do that. They don't have the money to do what the NBA did or what other major sports franchise do. I do think what they should do is just do a test in the beginning, like a little far, like, and just be like, once you're clear, and we'll just have the event happen, and at the very end, people may be positive, and we just turn a blind eye. Because I feel like if they're trying to test before and after every single race, you're going to end up kicking people out of the race. But if you just test in the beginning, have the race, and then see what happens.
Yeah. It's tough too. It's tough too because there's just a lot of the contact tracing stuff is self-reported, correct? If your parent, you went to dinner with your parent before the night of the semifinals, right? You're
not telling them.
The governing body doesn't. Well, the incentive is not to tell them because the governing body doesn't necessarily know that. If you're outside of a bubble, they are going to proceed as if you are fine, and then there's no incentive for you to report that you had contact with someone who tested positive. So it's just a massive headache all around. I don't know how I understand why now it's becoming clearer and clearer, like why the NBA obviously did what they did, right? They're on the tight time frame and they couldn't miss any games when they did it before, and they needed to have 99% certainty. And the only way you do it is if you just say, you can't go past this point. It's not allowed. You can't go past this point, and here are all the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, you can opt out, because everything else leaves open the possibility of a nightmare type scenario that you're describing, where a key athlete is missing and they're not going to run it's not a team sport. You can't go ahead and just play the game without that one running back or that one wide receiver. They're going to run the race, and this athlete's not going to be there.
This is my fear, though. We would, like, us and the people who follow this podcast and people who are really glued into the pulse of the sport, they would freak out if someone like Noah Lyles or Allison Felix or Donovan Brazier or Sin McLaughlin aren't able to compete, right? Okay, they're in shape, but they get pulled after the second round, and it's whatever. We'd be like, this is the end of the world, right? But at the same time, I feel like there will be people, or just like, they'll be like, whatever, the Olympics are still happening. Like, I feel like we are more attached to the people behind the jersey than a majority of people who just look at the front of the jersey. Like, when we watch the Olympics, we're watching Donovan Brazier. When a majority of people watch the Olympics, they're watching a USA athlete. And I think because of that, the chaos of the person wearing the jersey not being Donovan Brazier to a majority of people isn't that big of a deal. To us, it's a huge deal, but to, like, the sport goes on, right? I mean, Kenny Harrison was a world record holder, didn't go to the Olympics. So, people moved on, right? Christian Coleman's not going to be there. People are moving on, right? Yeah. So, I think they might have the eye, like, hey, it's just part of the game. Like, yeah, who cares if we didn't send Donovan Brazier? I like how we're using Donovan Brazier as our example. We're just picking him because he's the best So it's a very good compliment that we are projecting doomsday scenario on your career. Just let me know. We don't want it to happen to anyone, especially not Diamond.
No, no,
But we're just using it
no.
as an argument point.
I did see that the swimming trials start a few days before the track trials, and maybe the USAC comes out with a blanket policy that says this is how we're going to deal with this for all of our sports. I guess you would hope that they would do that, and you'd also hope that there's enough other events prior to that where people can use the information from that as a way to make the best decision moving forward. Because the flip side, I get your testing thing where you're saying just once at the beginning, once at the end. But I mean, the other side of that is, what if an infected person is in there and does then get like 7 people in the 200-meter final, which is at the end of the meet, infected, and then they're having to scratch, or there's that side of it too, right? Which is the McWalla thing with the norovirus. It was like spreading throughout the competitors, if I'm remembering it correctly. Like it was multiple people who were coming down with it. Like that would be the other side of it too. With a meet that long and that many people mixing with different teammates, running different events, it wouldn't take long for it to go bad in that direction as well too. Which, fingers crossed, that does not happen.
I think they might do a thing where you have to take a test every time you start a new event. So say you're just there for the 200, you have to do a test before your 200, and then that's it. You don't need to do one after. But if, say, you're doing a double, like a 5K, 10K, you have to do one before the 5K, and say you go on and finish the 5K. But then if you want to enter the 10K, you have to do another test before the 10K. So, like, and it allows people to be like, it just makes it so you don't stay. I think that just you do a test before every new event that you enter. I think
here's another thing they might do. We talked about limiting the field size for the Olympics, field sizes for the Olympics. I wonder if that's something they're discussing for the trials. Having the events. Well, you cut the events in half, and then maybe you can do a bubble. I mean, it's still tough with all the officials and meet personnel that they would come in contact with, but maybe if you cut it by 50%, you could do it. Because the alternative is you run the first rounds like a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, then eliminate a whole bunch of people, and then you have your select group that
for finals.
Exactly. Yeah. But you need to keep them completely separate. That seems not feasible in any way, shape, or form. But I could see them saying, okay, this field size, it was 36. Now it's down to 18. I guess 18 doesn't work out.
I think they're going to do what NCAA does and spread the events out more, right? So there's just less people in the waiting room. Like, just have all the women's events in the first half, all the men's events in the second half. And what you would normally, instead of doing 6 events in an hour, you're only doing 3 events in an hour. So everything's spread out. People were just wearing the masks in the waiting room. Yeah. I think the main thing is just that, like, an asymptomatic positive test is just going to skew everything, and it just sucks. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
We should. I think they need to pull the alarm and just do a garden clash. Everyone just runs their Olympic event in their garden. They live stream it on Facebook, and then we just pick the best results. And me and you will be the judges.
We pick the best garden.
We pick the best garden, and we select the team.
The odds of them with that many athletes and that many support personnel there, the odds of there being a positive test throughout the 10 days is extremely high. Just if you took because if you just took a random sample of the population, it would be extremely high. It doesn't even have anything to do with the track meet going on. Even with people being careful, it's going to be really difficult. My hope is, we're just in a different spot right then. And again, there'll be other sporting events between now and then, because we've seen how different sports have handled this differently, and people have evolved and their understanding of it and how best to manage. I think in the short term, the biggest concern would be the NCAA championships coming up. That, I think, would be a bigger concern.
But here's what's going to happen.
You can see top runners getting contact traced out.
No, I think the top runners will test negative before the meet goes, and then they don't have to worry about it, and then it's over. Like, they're not going to retest them on Friday night. They're just going to be like, you're good to go. Do your 48 hours of running, frolicking in the indoor facility, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And if you I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
they're
not
going to pull anyone out
it's
from the
not as
final.
Oh, I
'Cause
know.
it's
I'm
such
talking about
a short
before.
time.
I'm talking about the week before. I'm talking about the week before because they're college kids and they're around a lot of other kids, and you can take all the precautions. You can tell people to be cautious, but them doing it is a whole other thing. And again, it's a large group of athletes. I agree. I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be like the Olympic trials where there's a mid-meet issue. I'm talking about in the run up, those few days before when they have to report. We might hear about some teams, key runners, having to miss because of not even themselves testing positive, but getting contact traced out because of a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something.
Yeah, but it's one thing to tell a college kid to social distance. He's going to be like, screw that. I'm going to do what I want. It's another thing to tell a college kid, if you don't social distance, you don't get to go to the thing that you care about most in life. Like, they'll be like, I think a lot of these college kids are willing to, like, not talk to their girlfriend or boyfriend, are willing to just lock themselves in an apartment for the sake of being able to have an opportunity to run at the NCAA championship. Like, there's definitely a reward to following protocol for a collegiate athlete than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reward for a frat boy or sorority girl to be like to follow protocol because she's like, who cares if I get sick? But if it says, hey, you won't be able to go to the thing you care most about, I think they're going to care. And I think a lot of these college kids are going to be like, especially as they get closer, they're going to be like, hey, I want to run. I feel like I'm in my best shape of my life. I want to be able to win a national title. And I think I can going out to dinner one time for the sake of the goal in March. So I actually think there won't be that many star athletes that, pop out because they're going to be they're going to want to not test positive.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, I hope you're right. But we've seen it already happen with some teams, and maybe it will be different because it'll be around a much more consequential meet. But we've already seen people and teams miss competitions this year because it's just a numbers thing. 300 women's athletes, 300 men's athletes. The numbers are not in your favor. Now, if it's just a random team's seventh runner, it's not going to get any attention. It's going to be if it's a podium type team or an individual contender that people will take note. But yeah, knock on wood, that doesn't happen at all. Man, when we get to this time next year, when hopefully this is behind us, we're going to have to figure out how to fill the time in the podcast that we've devoted since March to COVID. It's going to be great. We're going to talk about, I don't know what we'll talk about, but we'll talk about something else. Maybe we'll talk about more indoor high jump because we had a big jump, Gordon, and I know this got your attention. Yaroslava Mahuchek, only 19 years old, 2.06 yesterday in a high jump competition, ties number 3 all time. Indoor world record 2.09, and then the outdoor world, 2.08 indoors. Outdoors, it's 2.09. So she's right there. We could see an outdoor world record fall this year. That's exciting.
If I was standing straight up and down, she would have been able to jump over my head. That's insane.
Yeah. What other?
I could actually have like a top hat on, and she'd still jump over me.
Yeah. So you have
over 6.5 feet.
So you have obviously Mondo doing what Mondo's doing in the pole vault. You have Krauser threatening 23 meters, and in the process will be threatening the world record in the shot put. You of course have Dalal Muhammad, the world record holder in the 400 hurdles, racing again this year. Sydney just behind her as well. What other records do you think are world records are under threat this year? Do you have one you're having to have an eye on? Men's 400-meter hurdles, of course, gets a lot of attention. Women's steeple. Is there another one that you're looking at?
I think the men's 5K and 10K. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah.
I actually think there's
Women's
not going to be a
5.
lot of. I feel like there's not going to be a lot of distance world records or like distance. Like I feel like 1500 to 10K are going to be kind of like we're just focused on being race sharp and not
Mhm.
like all time great sharp.
Yeah.
I feel like the reason why we got all the 5K and 10K and all these big world record performances was because there was no incentive to be ready for a race. The incentive was
Yeah.
just be ready for a time trial. So I think all the records are going to be in the 800 and down. Like I even think the 1500, we're not going to see anything. I think 800 and down is where we'll see records.
That was my bold prediction. Was Chariot
Yeah.
wins in Monaco and breaks the world record, and then you had Ingebrigtsen upsetting Chariot in
Ooh,
Tokyo
yeah.
at the Olympics as the world record holder. Yeah, I mean there were a lot last year if you think about it, between Mondo, the 5K, the 10K, the women's 5,000. There was a lot that was happening last year for a year with such few opportunities to race.
The hour run that Mo Farah
Who could
broke.
forget? Who
Who
could
could
forget?
forget the great hour run?
And Safan Hassan as well too. Well, the women's half, the men's half. There were a lot. Now that that was a bad question I set up this segment for. I mean, it's more
Yeah.
like what record isn't in danger. Do you have any other
Speaking of the
text that you
men's
want to
half,
read?
speaking of the half marathon, the rack half marathon was
I saw
canceled.
that. Yeah, in Saudi Arabia, which had a really good field
Field.
as well too. So we'll have to wait. Although I got to admit, as much as I wanted to see them people run it back, the Valencia half was really good. And
Yeah.
I'm not a guy who gets overly excited about half marathons. So if something had to be canceled, I'd prefer it be a half marathon than a marathon or a track championship or a cross country championship at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Like
They had
we saw
Kipawak
the
Candy.
evolution of
They had Kipawak Candy, Jacob Kiplimo, Jeffrey Kimura, Helen Obiri, Perez, Jep Chirchir,
mm,
Bridget.
that was everybody.
It had everyone.
Yeah.
But now it has no one
Man, we
because
could
they
have
canceled it.
if they didn't cancel, we almost would have had to bring Lincoln back to do a road race
Ooh.
preview because I know you don't like to do those. We would have had to give him a call, see if he answers the phone, and can talk up some Kibiwat candy because he's a big Kibiwat candy fan. But
Lincoln's been
alas,
ghosting us lately on our group text. What's
I
with that?
know. I'm disappointed.
He
He
leaves
did send
FloTrack and
us.
then all of a sudden can't talk to us.
He did send us something. I don't. We probably didn't respond to it though, and maybe that was the wrong message that we sent. Um, also, while we're talking about YouTube here, do you want to talk about what else people can find on YouTube, Gordon, from Monday, perhaps?
Oh yeah, if you guys want to watch the Nico Young race and all the other 5 races that happened at Nevada, they're on the YouTube channel. You can watch them there. Uh, Great races, a full race. I sat on the back of the cart, got a clock
Mm-hmm.
going. Show the mile split, 3K split, 5K split. It's actually when you look at the results, you see Nico lose by 2 seconds. Nico, watch the race back, but the entire time I thought Nico was going to win, and it was weird. You wouldn't. It was. I thought that Connor would control the race, but Nico controlled the entire race. Watch it for
Mm-hmm.
yourself on the YouTube channel. It was a very interesting experience. Luis Grijalva was sitting in the cart with me while we were filming it,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked at him, and he just like looked at me and smiled. I mean, I thought he smiled because he had a mask on, but his eyes like moved in a certain way that made it assume he was smiling.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great race. Watch it. The women's race is up there. Yeah,
All the
enjoy
races,
getting
all 6.
all the races.
Yeah.
Well, no, the other
And
4 are on FloTrack.
okay, the other 4 on
The
FloTrack.
2
Yeah.
main races are on YouTube.
And on that YouTube race, Gordon explains why it wasn't live for everybody who wanted to know.
There were people who thought, man,
Just
I'm sorry, but like we never said this was a live event. I don't know where people figured that out, but the word live was never written anywhere. Yeah, we weren't planning on going live. We were just going to get their races and interviews. So hopefully you like it. You know, it's
it was
better
on
than nothing,
demand.
right? It's on
Yeah, it was on
demand.
demand. Yeah,
And we
that's what we
might do
could
the
do.
same thing for the next Nevada meet. On demand.
Yeah, yeah. I was giving you a hard time there, Gordon, because I know you're reading the comments there. It's
Yeah.
okay.
People were upset it wasn't live. Sorry.
I wanted to talk about the mask thing as it pertains to doing interviews because you can't see their face, and that does make it kind of tricky. Because when you ask a question, you don't see. Hey, are they smiling at this question? Do they hate this question? I mean, they can't see me either, so I guess that's good. Everybody has their poker face on. You're right that you go by the eyes. I think when you see that, you're like, okay, well, they're reacting in some
Eyebrows.
sort of
Yeah.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what way they're reacting, but they're reacting in some sort of way.
The one thing that bothers me most about the masks is when people are chewing gum behind a
Mm,
mask, because it literally
okay.
looks like they're eating like a horse trough of food. Like it looks like they're like a pig eating food inside their mask because their mouth is moving and it's just like, what are you doing inside of that thing? It's just like really
Yeah, yeah.
disturbing. But they're just chewing
I'm
gum.
looking. I'm looking at the schedule for this FSU meet on Friday. Those races are going to wrap by the time we start, so we'll be able to do a recap of those races, or at least the results. So that's exciting for Friday's show. 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Central is the first one, and then the women's is at 8:30. So it's going to finish right before. Give us a name, like a deep, 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 deep cut here of somebody who could surprise people on Friday of these races.
James Segura, Eastern
That's
Kentucky.
okay.
It's a deep name.
I
He
guess
hasn't
that's
run in like 3 years. He's really good.
okay. Yeah.
You
All
want
right.
a
I'll
deeper
give it.
name?
No. Yeah. Go one level deeper. One level deeper. I found one guy.
What?
I'll give you mine first. You ready?
Oh no, I don't want
You
to
ready
go.
for
Okay,
this?
you go.
Okay. Number 442 on this list. A little guy by the name of Festus Lagat. Keep an eye on him.
Yeah, come on. I have two more. I have
I was serious.
one.
It's my guy.
Adrian Wildschut from Florida State, the Coastal Carolina
Okay.
transfer, South African.
Mm-hmm.
See what he does. Number two, I'm excited to see what Jace Ashbrenner does for Colorado. True freshman.
Okay.
Do you know who Jace
Yeah, yeah.
Ashbrenner is?
Went to high school with Nico Young.
Yeah. Hey, it might be in the genes. I'm not sure that's how it works. I don't think you're
Not how
related
it
to
works
people
at
you go to
all.
high school with. But
I
if
hope
he
not.
was, he might be
Yeah.
really fast. You never know. I'm excited to see what his former high school teammate does for Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, Wetmore, he's going to get him ready to go. So why not?
Yeah, I'm interested to see the Colorado women too. A lot of names you recognize there. I'm wondering if they can put it together this year. In terms of the all name team, Syracuse men just running away with it again with the Joe Dragon, JP Trojan 1-2 punch is really hard to overcome. You also have, I think Aiden Tooker is kind of a cool name. Dominic Hockenberry, like even their 3 and 4 guys are pretty strong there. But when you have a Trojan Dragon 1-2, that's hard to overcome.
I mean, Matthew Scrape,
Okay.
Silas Durfell.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if Dragon and Trojan ran for office. What would be a better ticket, the Dragon Trojan ticket or the Trojan Dragon ticket?
Yeah.
Definitely the Trojan Dragon ticket, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, imagine if you went to USC too. That'd be pretty wild. Yeah. I mean, your favorite name in the NCAA, I know, is still Tom Brady for Michigan.
Nah.
That's what gets you.
Hey, I knew about Tom Brady a whole year ago. Everyone, our boy John Galt got really excited about finding out that Tom Brady ran for Michigan. But Tom Brady ran for Michigan back in 2019. And he ran – I actually thought it might have been him. I'm not even kidding, because he ran unattached for Michigan in a cross-country meet in 2019 at a Michigan home meet. And I think Tom Brady was in Michigan for an alumni event, for a football game. So it's it could have potentially been Tom Brady finishing 16th in this random 5K, but it wasn't. It was a different Tom Brady.
Can neither confirm nor deny that. Yeah, take it easy on John. The Patriots haven't had the best year, so I think he's just nostalgic for Brady to come back, and that's what made him excited there. Okay, we'll leave it there.
Who do you want to win a Super Bowl?
Chiefs, of course. Chiefs.
Or the Buccaneers.
Yeah, you're being a contrarian. My son is a big Mahomes fan. He's only 5 years old, doesn't know the rules of football at all, but
And he knows I'm a Mahomes fan.
he watched the conference championships, and he's like that guy. He's like that guy. His hair is similar to Mahomes, and he liked that his hair looked like Mahomes. And then I showed him a minute and a half Mahomes highlight where it was the 10 best plays of Mahomes's season, and he thought it was just the coolest thing. Explaining football to a 5-year-old is super hard. The concept of downs, the concept of touchdowns. He thought if the ball just goes in the end zone, it's a touchdown. So if someone threw it out of the back of the end zone, he would scream, touchdown. I'm like, no, they need to catch it and then run through it. Extra points make no sense. Kickoffs are kind of weird. I can understand where if you didn't grow up in the United States, you just never know the rules of football and you don't have any desire to learn either. It's very complicated.
Did you watch the Nickelodeon game that was a playoff game for the Saints?
No, I didn't.
Bears?
No, I thought that was weird.
Nickelodeon hosted a playoff game, and they had like graphics, and it was fun. People liked it, right? Because it was interesting. And I was listening to a podcast with the play-by-play guys from the Nickelodeon game. I forget his name, but it was like an NFL player who was doing play-by-play. And he's like, yeah, it was a big success. And he's like, I really think they need to do Nickelodeon games for other sports. And he talked about how would Nickelodeon cover an Olympic track and field event. And like, imagine if those like slime graphics in the triple jump pit, or like, just different googly eyes on like Usain Bolt. And I was kind of thinking about that would be kind of cool if there was like slime cannons that went off at the bell lap instead of like the starter's gun and, stuff like that. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting because aren't you pretty young to get hooked into that? Like a 13-year-old doesn't think Nickelodeon's cool, right? Like a 13-year-old still is too old for Nickelodeon and slime. So are you trying to like get like 6 and 7-year-olds to be into football? Is that the goal?
I mean, the low-key goal was it actually got adults to watch it because the adults were there for like the entertainment value. It really wasn't for kids. It was for the adults disguised as for kids. It's like Pixar movies, right? They're for kids, but then there's an emotional thing that the adults cry to, and they're like, "No, don't kill Woody," stuff like that. So.
Wow! Spoiler alert here on the FloTrack podcast. At the end, apologies to everybody who hasn't seen that movie yet. We'll leave it there. We'll be back Friday. Sorry about Gordon right there. Let's play this music. Alon, let's get out of here before Gordon ruins any more classics. Thank you to Alon, by the way, for producing. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Check out the YouTube page, FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. Later.
Like and subscribe.